Wasn't the phone call that broke me. It was the silence after. My son-in-law answered my daughter's phone, and I could hear him breathing, but he didn't say a word for what felt like a full 10 seconds. Then he said, "She's not here, sir. She hasn't been here since Tuesday." And the way he said it, flat, almost rehearsed, made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I'm 63 years old. I've buried a wife. I've outlasted 2 recessions, a heart attack at 57, and a career that ended before I was ready to let it go. I don't rattle easy, but something in that man's voice on a Wednesday morning made me set down my coffee cup very carefully, like I was afraid of making noise. My daughter's name is June. She's 34. She lives 40 minutes from me in Clarkston, up near the Georgia-Alabama line, in a house her husband picked out and she decorated to look like the farmhouse she always dreamed about growing up. Shiplap walls, a front porch with 2 rocking chairs that nobody ever actually sits in, a vegetable garden in the back that she sends me photos of every spring like it's her greatest achievement, which honestly it might be. She called me every Sunday, without fail. Even during the year her marriage was going sideways, even during the months when I could hear the strain in her voice and she kept saying, "We're fine, Daddy, don't worry." She still called. Every Sunday, 11 a.m., right before she started making lunch. She hadn't called the Sunday before. I told myself she was busy. I told myself she forgot, which she never does, but I needed to believe it. I called back twice and got voicemail. I texted. Nothing. By Wednesday morning, I convinced myself everything was fine and I was being an old man about it. Then her husband answered her phone and told me she hadn't been home since Tuesday. I need to back up a little because this story doesn't make sense without the part I spent 18 months not wanting to look at directly. June married a man named Stuart when she was 29. I liked him well enough in the beginning. He was quiet, deliberate, the kind of man who shakes your hand too firmly and makes too much eye contact, like he's been coached on how to seem trustworthy. He worked in commercial real estate outside of Birmingham, did well enough that they never had to worry, drove a truck that was newer than it needed to be. He was 10 years older than June, which I had thoughts about that I mostly kept to myself. The first 2 years were fine, from what I could see. Then something shifted. I couldn't put my finger on it. June started calling me more often during the week, little calls, checking in, asking about nothing in particular. She'd always been close to me. Her mother passed when June was 16, breast cancer, fast and terrible, so it wasn't unusual for her to lean on me. But these calls felt different. Like she was filling time. Like she was making sure someone knew where she was. I asked her once, directly, "Are you happy, baby?" She was quiet for a moment, then she laughed and said, "I'm tired, Daddy. That's all. We're both just tired." I let it go. I shouldn't have, but I did. Last spring, about 14 months before that Wednesday morning, my neighbor Lester. We've lived next door to each other for 22 years. His wife and my wife were close. We look out for each other, the way older men in small towns do without making a big deal of it. Lester told me he'd seen June's car parked outside the old Beaumont property on Route 9, the big house that had been empty for about 3 years. He'd been driving by on his way to the hardware store, mid-afternoon on a weekday. Her car sat there for 45 minutes while he ran his errands and came back. Probably just turned around in the driveway, I told him. "Car was there when I left, car was there when I came back," he said. "Just thought you should know." I did nothing with that information. I tucked it away in a drawer in my mind and locked it. What I know now is that she was seeing someone. Had been for about 8 months before Lester spotted the car. A man named Cole. I only know this because I heard the name later, in a context I'll get to. Who had moved to the county the previous year, originally from somewhere in Tennessee. I don't know how they met. I don't know much about him at all. And at this point I'm not sure I want to. What I know is that June had been trying to end it for at least a month before she disappeared. I know this because she told me. Not then. Later, from a hospital bed with her arm in a sling and a bandage on the left side of her face, looking at me with eyes that were still her eyes but sitting in a face I barely recognized. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. The Wednesday morning I called her number and Stuart answered. I drove to Clarkston inside of 35 minutes. He was sitting at the kitchen table when I got there. He'd given me a key 2 Christmases ago. One of those gestures that seems like generosity and might have been something else. A way of making me feel included so I'd be more likely to be on his side if things ever went wrong. People do that. I've lived long enough to know people do that. He looked like he hadn't slept. His shirt was from the day before. There was a mug on the table that had gone cold. "When did you last hear from her?" I asked. I didn't sit down. I stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the hall, and I kept my coat on. "Monday night," he said. "She said she was going to a friend's place." "Donna? Out near Heflin." He looked at the mug. "I called Donna Tuesday morning. She hadn't been there." "And you waited until Wednesday to tell anyone?" He looked up at me then. His jaw moved like he was deciding something. "I thought she needed space," he said. It's been complicated." Complicated. I said the word back to him like I was tasting it. I think she's been seeing someone." He said it to the table. I didn't want to say it out loud before. It made it more real. I don't know how to describe what I felt standing there. It wasn't sympathy exactly. It wasn't contempt either, though I'll admit contempt was somewhere in the neighborhood. Mostly I felt cold and very awake and like someone had turned up the resolution on everything in the room. The pattern on the backsplash tiles, the smudge on the window above the sink, the way his hands were wrapped around that cold mug like he needed something to hold. "Have you called the police?" I asked. "Not yet." "Why not?" He didn't answer. I called them myself, standing in his kitchen while he watched me. The deputies who responded were professional, kind, and pretty clearly constrained by the fact that an adult woman who has a history of marital conflict leaving her house is not, on its face, a missing persons case. They took down the information. They told me they would look into it. They gave me a card. One of them, a young woman with a ponytail and a careful way of speaking, pulled me aside on the porch and said gently, "Sir, most of the time in situations like this, the person has left voluntarily, and they reach out when they're ready." "She would have called me," I said. She nodded slowly. "Is there anyone she might have reached out to who might not have told you right away?" I thought about that. June had friends, a handful of close ones. Donna, who she'd apparently not stayed with. A woman named Barbara from her church. A cousin on her mother's side I'd lost touch with. I called all 3 from the parking lot of the sheriff's substation while sitting in my truck. None of them had heard from her. I drove home. I didn't sleep. Thursday morning my phone rang at 6:47. Unknown number. I answered it before the second ring. Daddy. Her voice was thin and strange, like it was coming through water, but it was her. "June, where are you?" "I'm okay," she said. "I'm okay. I need you to listen to me before you say anything else. I'm at Calhoun County Medical. I'm okay. Daddy, please don't panic. I need you to just drive here and not panic." I was already standing up. I was already reaching for my keys. "Are you hurt?" A pause. The kind of pause that answers the question. "I'll explain everything when you get here," she said. "Just come." She had a fractured wrist, 3 cracked ribs, a deep laceration along her left cheekbone that had needed 12 stitches, and a concussion. She had bruises in colors. I have no interest in describing to you. She had been found by a county road crew on Route 9, about 150 yards from the old Beaumont property, early Thursday morning. She'd been there since Tuesday night. I sat in the chair next to her bed for a long time without speaking. There are things a father's heart does when he sees his child like that. Things that don't have words and don't need them. I held her good hand. I watched her breathe, Outside the window, it was a grey November morning, the kind of flat, cold light that makes everything look provisional, like the world hasn't fully committed to continuing. She told me what happened in pieces, not all at once, over the course of that day and the days that followed. She had been trying to end things with Cole for about 6 weeks. He hadn't taken it well. She described him as someone who could be completely normal, even warm, for long stretches of time, and then become a different person in a way that had no warning, not rage exactly, but a cold and deliberate pressure, like a hand on the back of your neck. He'd started showing up places, her grocery store, the parking lot at the school where she volunteered 2 mornings a week. He never made a scene. He just appeared, and smiled, and let her understand that he could find her whenever he wanted. She hadn't told Stuart. She hadn't told me. She told me she was afraid of what would happen if she made it official, if he named it out loud. She was afraid of Cole. She was, I think, also ashamed in the way people are ashamed of things that aren't entirely their fault but feel like they should be. Tuesday evening, she'd agreed to meet Cole one last time. She knew it was probably a mistake. She told herself it was to talk, to make it clear, to close it. She met him at the Beaumont property because it was isolated, and she thought, and this is the part that still twists something in my chest when I think about it. She thought isolated meant safer, because no one would see them together, not because no one would see what he did to her. He didn't want it to be over. I won't describe the details of what happened because they are my daughter's details to share, or not share, not mine. What I will tell you is that she fought. She fought hard enough that she got away, on foot, in the dark, on a gravel road she could barely see, and she made it 150 yards before she couldn't anymore, and she lay in the ditch by the side of that road for the better part of 12 hours, drifting in and out, until a county truck came through at first light. She never lost consciousness long enough to stop knowing she was alive. My daughter is the strongest person I have ever known, and I have known some strong people. Cole was picked up that same Thursday afternoon. He was at his rental house outside Piedmont, eating lunch, when the deputies came. He didn't run. He acted, by all accounts, bewildered, genuinely confused, or a very good imitation of it, which is something I've thought about a lot since. He hired a lawyer within the hour. The case took 11 months to come to trial. I won't walk you through all of it because I'm not sure I could do it without losing the thread of what I'm trying to tell you. What I'll say is this. The legal system moves at its own pace, and that pace has no relationship to the pace of the people waiting inside it. It does not care that you are 63 years old and spending money you were saving for something else on flights to Birmingham for hearings that last 40 minutes and resolve nothing. It does not care that your daughter has to drive past the Route 9 turnoff twice a week on her way to her physical therapist. It is a machine and it runs, and eventually it produces an outcome. The outcome was a conviction on 2 counts of aggravated assault and 1 count of unlawful imprisonment. The judge sentenced him to 14 years. With the system the way it is, he could be eligible for parole review after serving 8. That math is not lost on me. His lawyer argued self-defense, that June had been the aggressor, that he'd acted to restrain her. I was in the courtroom when he said it. I kept my face still. It was the hardest thing I've done since I sat in a different kind of room and heard a doctor tell me my wife had maybe 4 months. The jury was out for less than a day. June and Stuart separated about 3 months after the trial ended. I don't know exactly what happened between them, and she hasn't told me the full version, and I haven't pushed. What I know is that Stuart moved to Huntsville for a job, and June stayed in the farmhouse, and after a while, she started sitting in one of those front porch rocking chairs after all. I drive up to see her most Saturdays now. Sometimes I bring things, whatever's in season, from my own small garden, a pie from the bakery in town that she's liked since she was small, a book if I've read something she'd enjoy. Sometimes we sit on that porch and don't talk much. Just watch the light change over the field across the road. She's in therapy, has been since she left the hospital. She has a good therapist, a woman she trusts, and that matters more than I can say. She called me last Sunday, 11 a.m., right on schedule. I had my coffee ready. We talked for an hour and 10 minutes about absolutely nothing important. Her garden, an argument she'd had with her neighbor about a fence line, a movie she'd watched that she thought I'd hate and described to me in detail anyway just to enjoy my reaction. She laughed 3 times, the real laugh, the one that's been hers since she was small. I've replayed those 3 laughs more times than I can count this week. There's a thing I didn't understand when I was young that I understand completely now. The people we love are not safe just because we love them. Loving someone doesn't create a field around them. It doesn't protect them from the dark places they wander into, or the wrong people they trust at the wrong moments, or the 100 ordinary decisions that stack up quietly into something catastrophic. All you can do is stay close enough that they know where to find you when they need to come back. She always knew where to find me. I drove 40 minutes in 35 that morning, and I would do it again, and I would do it without hesitating. And I hope she never needs me to. But if she does, I'll be ready. I keep thinking about the drawer. Not a real drawer. The one in my mind where I put Lester's words that afternoon. The one where I stored every Sunday call that felt a little off. Every "we're fine, Daddy" that landed wrong. I locked things in there and told myself I was respecting her privacy, giving her space, not being one of those fathers who can't let go. But there's a difference between giving someone space and giving yourself permission to look away. I'm still figuring out which one I was doing. What happened to June didn't come from nowhere. It came from a long chain of small moments. Her choices, his choices, mine, each one ordinary enough on its own, each one adding a link. That's what I've had to sit with. Cause and consequence don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they just accumulate quietly in the background until one Wednesday morning a man answers the wrong phone and you realize the chain got very long while you weren't counting. June made mistakes. She'd be the first to tell you that. She trusted someone she shouldn't have trusted. Stayed in something she should have walked away from sooner. Tried to end it alone when she needed help. But I've watched my daughter over this past year, and I'll tell you what I've seen. She has not once tried to make herself smaller than what she did. She looked at her own choices without flinching, worked through them with her therapist, and kept going. That kind of honesty about yourself, the willingness to see clearly even when it's painful, is harder than most people realize. It takes something most people spend their whole lives avoiding. Stuart, I think, is still in that avoidance. I don't say that with bitterness. I say it because I recognize it. I did it too. We are good at telling ourselves the comfortable version. The version where we're just tired, just giving space, just not wanting to make it more real by saying it out loud. The comfortable version costs less in the moment and more over time. Always. And Cole, whatever was broken in him, whatever led him to believe that another person's no was a negotiation, that is a failure of something fundamental. Not intelligence, not even self-control exactly. Something deeper, the capacity to recognize that other people are real, that their lives matter as much as you're wanting. Without that, everything else falls apart eventually. It always does. What I keep coming back to is this. June survived because she didn't quit. Not just in that ditch on Route 9, though God knows what that took. She survived because she got up every day after, went to her appointments, answered my calls, tended her garden, and kept choosing to be present in her own life. That's not a small thing. That's everything, actually. Survival isn't a single moment of courage. It's 100 ordinary mornings where you decide to keep going anyway. I'm 63. I've had my own share of mornings like that. I know what it costs. She calls me every Sunday at 11. I have my coffee ready. That's enough. That's more than enough.